So in this third lecture, we're going to look at some animal viruses, specifically human viruses, and then briefly look at some plant and some unusual infectious agents called prions and viroids. Animal viruses can cause diseases in many different ways. One is called acute diseases, that's colds and influenza, where the symptoms get increasingly worse for a short period of time, but then the body gets rid of the virus and the infection is over. Contrast that with chronic viruses like hepatitis C, which is a long-term infection. Other viruses can go latent, usually in nervous tissue, and then when the nerves get agitated, they can then reactivate. Herpes simplex, like the cold sores, is like this. There are some viruses that are asymptomatic, which means they're there. We can see that they're there, but they're not causing any visible symptoms. And probably the worst of all is oncogenesis, which is viruses having the ability to cause cancer in the host cell. The chickenpox virus is one of those latent ones. You get chickenpox as a child. Many of you didn't because you had the vaccine, but it could come back later when the nerves get agitated and come back as an adult version called shingles. It's because it was always there and it would then reemerge along the nerve line. HPV is a virus that is an oncogenic virus, which means that it can induce cancers. In this case, HPV is a sexually transmitted virus that can, in some cases, lead to cervical cancer. Some other viruses and illnesses that can be caused by it, one is encephalitis, which is infection of the brain. Rabies is like this, measles, colds, which infect the respiratory system. We have things like rhinoviruses or parainfluenza virus, RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, hepatitis, infection of the liver with hepatitis viruses, skin infections with the chickenpox, herpes, cold sores, smallpox, papillomavirus, which causes the warts, sexually transmitted diseases, herpes, papillomavirus, HIV, are some examples. One of the best ways we have to prevent viral infections is through vaccinations, although there are many people opposed to these. It's still one of our best ways of protecting us. Several different ways you can make a virus. One's attenuated, which means weakened live virus. The problem here is that there's a very small risk of infection, which isn't so small whenever you are the one who gets infected. There's also killed viruses or molecular subunits that can act as vaccines. We talk about the infectious process of HIV because it has some illustrations of what we talked about so far. One, it's a enveloped icosahedral virus. It attaches to specific receptor called CD4 on immune cells, specifically helper T cells of the immune system. It goes into the body. It's a single-stranded RNA virus that then carries with it reverse transcriptase that converts the RNA to DNA that then incorporates into the host cell genome. From there, it starts to then send out messenger RNAs to produce more viral proteins, capsid proteins, and also replicates the RNA viral genome. These then assemble and it buds off slowly, which slowly weakens the immune system of the victim as the virus continues to spread. Plant viruses are unique in that they can transmit two different ways. One is horizontal transmission, which is usually entering the plant by some damage, either done by an insect or by the wind. It may come in with pollen from another plant, or insects may bite the plant as it's eating it and transmit the virus. But another way is vertical transmission, where the parent plant sends the virus on to the offspring. In either case, these viruses can disrupt the crop growth and significantly affect the food supply. So the crop quantity globally can be affected by viral infections. Some effects we see as a result of plant viral infections are what look like tumors on a plant. They're called galls, and this massive, it's called hyperplasia, so that the cells are induced to reproduce very quickly, or hypoplasia, where their cells are not allowed to reproduce, and it forms these yellow blotches like we saw with the tobacco mosaic virus. Cell necrosis means that the cells die, the stems turn dark, leaves and fruit turn dark. Abnormal growth patterns get malformed limbs, leaves, fruits that don't look right, and then finally discoloration. To wrap up the chapter on these infectious agents, there's some unique ones here. One's called prions, proteinaceous infectious agents. They're very small, contain no nucleic acid, and historically the idea that something could be infectious without a nucleic acid was considered impossible. But a guy named Stanley Prisner did a lot of work and faced a lot of controversy trying to show that these things actually did exist and did cause disease. Finally, after a lot of work, convinced most biologists that such things do exist. It infects the neurological system. So things like mad cow disease, scabies, chronic wasting disease in animals, and then in humans we see Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and Kuru, which is actually spread by cannibalism. One of the unique things about prions is that they're not destroyed by cooking. Usually proteins can get destroyed by heat, but these will not. What causes this prion infection is the conversion of a normal protein that's in your brain called PRPC, which gets induced to change to a disease-causing form called PRPSC. And what happens then is if the malformed protein comes in contact with the normal protein, it forces the normal protein to change its shape. That's going to occur spontaneously with the mutant that causes the change in the shape of the protein, or it can be caused by consuming food that has the PRPSC malformed protein, and then it gets transferred to the brain tissue. What causes the disease is the change in the tissue of the brain. It goes to what's called spongiform encephalitis. Encephalitis or encephalopathy is infections or pathologies in the brain, and it's called spongiform because it forms these big lesions in the brain that makes the brain look like a sponge. And finally, there's viroids, small circles of RNA, so it's just nucleic acid without the protection of the capsid. We've only seen these in the plants, but they can cause malformed plant tissue and even crop failures, but it's just RNA, nucleic acid without the capsid